Great. Thank you. Thank you for all of you that are attending. So I'm going to give, this is probably the third or fourth talk on this subject, so I'm going to summarize. I was a traditional, if there is such a thing, evolutionary astrologer for a very long time, 10, 14 years, I think. And my life began changing again. And it's been 3, 4, 5 years of a great deal of interchange. And I am not the same person, and I have been emerging, and I have been, without realizing at first, integrating ego and soul, which makes for an interesting topic title. I thought someone should give a talk on that. And so I use the roots of, well, roots isn't a good way to say it. I use the essence of evolutionary astrology philosophy, but I find from what's going on in my own life, I'm expanding. I find many people are expanding at this time. And that really is what my work and my orientation is becoming about. And so I have been making it up as I go, as my life unfolds, and I'm continuing that. And it's, as I'm moving along, it's taking more solid form and starting to make sense as I integrate it. Now, I'm going to venture that most or all of people that want to have a conversation, want to listen to a discussion on this topic, have what they would consider a pretty spiritual orientation in the broadest sense of the term, whatever that means to you as an individual. And I basically say, or am experiencing that we're at a very huge turning point. Of all of these statements I'm making are my perspective or opinion, and not necessarily universal truths. I may not be 100% accurate, but it's where my life is going. And I realized the Earth, the planet, is in a vast awakening process at this time. And, in the United States, with some of the stuff that's going on, one might question that. In some ways, it seems like we're going backwards, or appear to be going backwards. But I still feel that these are symptoms of perhaps a reaction to the changes that are going on. The 3 volunteer people, as I've been asking for, have significant change going on in their life. I think many people at this time have significant change going on in their life. And it was interesting because of the 3 little write-ups I received from the 3 people, they're each having change in what I would say a different way, yet significant change. And I would say that's what's going on. Another interesting thing I noticed is that one has a packed second house, including Pluto in the second house. This is just for today. One has Pluto in the second house, and one has Chiron in Taurus. That's not as second house a chart, but still I saw the same symbol. And I myself have Moon Mars Taurus, and I will say that in my life, and I think to a large extent Taurus in general, change has not been the most pleasant and sought after experience. there are reasons for this, and there are good reasons for this. There are very good reasons for it. And we are in a time of great change. And so some of this is about learning how to befriend change and to not see it as adversarial or something that one has to survive or deal with. That is true too. But that actually it's here to serve us. And change also highlights our wounds and the places where we feel insecure. And I feel like that has a lot to do with resistance to change, which is one way I would describe the undercurrent that's going on in the United States. Resistance to change because it creates a feeling of insecurity because we haven't learned how to flow with change and realize that everything that happens is for our benefit and that life is on our side. This is somewhat contrary to the conditioning of most people, particularly Plutonian kind of people, because we're used to having our apple carts upset, and it hasn't always created fun experiences, painful in fact, often. And so because of the perspective or frame that we have placed on it, it can be something that is fearful, or we may want to avoid or wish it would go away, etc. So part of my work and orientation and my own growth is realizing that change is always for the best, even when it's hard. It's not an accident, and it's the essence of life because nothing is really standing still or sitting still. We haven't learned to flow with that. Part of the change in general, I'll rephrase that. We are learning to flow with that. That is what's going on. I never used to like the terms I'm about to say of what, it's one of the ways people talk about these changes that are going on, and calling it 3D reality versus 5D reality. D means dimensional. And I used to be really turned off by that terminology. I live in what was kind of a new agey kind of place where a lot of lingo gets tossed around. I used to wonder if people really understood exactly what they were referring to. But lo and behold, I'm beginning to realize that there is some truth at the core of this way of looking at things. 3D reality, I would describe as a linear sort of approach to life, to spirituality. In the spiritual sense, it would be a series of lifetimes lived out linearly. Siri just popped up commenting on my question. That was interesting. A series of lives carried out sequentially, and the concepts of bad karma and good karma. And in these, you can avoid your life intentions or life purpose by getting too distracted or being lazy or being afraid or being angry or just generally messing up in life. And then you have to suffer the consequences thereof. That's how I, in a nutshell, would describe 3D reality. And that has been the prevailing spiritual view, in my opinion, for a very long time. And I dare to say that all of the religions on the planet, in varying permutations and perspectives, enforce that view, subscribe to that view. And basically what I'm experiencing and realizing is that view is now outmoded. That's not, it no longer fits. And we're in a really exciting time because a brand new energies are permeating our world. And they're so new, we don't have a frame or concepts yet to really frame what they are. And any and all of us that can relate to or resonate with what I'm talking about are souls who have chosen to come in during this transitional time to participate in it. Because we're all, in a sense, people attracted to that, pioneer souls with a desire to be pioneering, to participate in bringing in something new, and in helping to change a world that in many ways has been going around and around for a long time. And that's actually really exciting to me. And I would dare say to, many of you, if not all of you. And as such, we don't really have a lot of rule books, guidebooks, holy books at this point to count on to point out the way, to tell us what's right or wrong, because all of that sort of stuff is conditioned by our past, by what has been. And that is, to me, what we're breaking free of. And all of the experiences that we're having, that we experience as difficult, as frustrating, as uncertain, and, I'll back up for a second. One of the premises I take with this is that the vast majority of people that resonate, that feel truth and feel drawn to what I'm talking about, tend to be quite sensitive souls, very sensitive beings. Some really, really, really sensitive, but all sensitive. And of course, anybody who's sensitive has gotten the personal experience any number of times in their life. The world is not really set up at this point to value what I would call spiritual, emotional sensitivity. You get a lot of flack. People don't understand it. This is not news to any of us. And it's also the source of a lot of the wounds that we have experienced. Much of this, of course, comes out of our childhoods. Because basically, if you want to participate in a great shift that's coming to the planet after a long period of time, you have to be if you want to be in the body and boots on the ground, so to speak, you have to be here, which requires being born. And since out of the multi-billion families that there are on the earth, most of them are what we would just probably describe as emotionally dysfunctional. Most of them, we're going to experience various kinds of wounds and conditionings prior to actually stepping into our more adult states and beginning our personal journey. And so part of our journey is finding the healing for those things that we have experienced. Now, the interesting part is that when one has experienced deep wounding in certain realms in life, and then finds ways of bringing healing to them that work and that are effective, then one has accomplished something that becomes of value to other people. Because what works in healing, let's put it this way, therapy, traditional therapy has its value. I've had a lot of it. But it has built-in limits because of its overall view of what being a human being is. Many of us here are not here for the reasons of trying to find a good way to integrate into the existing society on the existing society's own terms. In other words, to be part of the mainstream, which a lot of the preservation of a society, including people that are trying to help people, has the implicit belief that you're supposed to kind of fit into the prevailing. And, and a progressive view is, yes, sure, this mainstream has a lot of room for improvement, and but we need people in there working for that improvement, and you can be what you are within that system. Now, a lot of people are actually born in here to do exactly that, and that is exactly what they should be doing. But some of us are not here for that, and there haven't really been schools and counselors, for the most part, and books and so forth teaching you how to live out your life purpose when your life purpose is something that's not currently of the mainstream. Then you go searching, because then you can feel half crazy. Then you can feel very self-doubtful. Am I fooling myself? Am I kidding myself? Why am I like this? Why can't I do what all these other people are doing that seem to make them happy? And so I am happy to say that, though it took me a long time and many efforts, that it's okay to own, admit, acknowledge that, to know from within, one is not here to do the normal things, so to speak. One is here to advance the collective by being part of it. This does not necessarily mean, I have learned, you don't have to be out front teaching 12,000 people or 200 people. That is some people's roles. Other people's roles are to simply and quietly in their own life, even sitting on their own couch, in their own family, to learn to be okay with living out my unique authenticity. The more one lives out one's authenticity, I find, the more one doesn't want to compromise that authenticity. We sensitive, empathic people tend to want to meet other people in their own energy where they are. You got what I mean? We want to adapt how we come across what we do to try to meet someone else's energy where they are, which that can include damping down my light in speaking to somebody else because I can feel that they're uncomfortable, or I don't want to blow them out of the water. But what I've begun to realize is that by maintaining one's light, regardless of the effect it's having on others, and I'm not talking about confronting them in their face and being the spiritual one-up and all that. I'm talking about simply holding to the inner space of authenticity, even if it's making the person uncomfortable. Because the perspective to realize is perhaps this person's soul is wanting to grow, and has called into its space someone who is in a place that is a little beyond where that soul is. And they're going to feel uncomfortable, and it may bring up their limits and their emotions that they don't like to feel, or even their pain that they haven't processed, but that this is part of the healing process, and that each of us are called and will have, those of us who sense this is why I'm here to help. We are at times, we desire to help. We are at times going to be in situations with people that are going to react, which has nothing to do with me, although I tend to take it on and feel like I've done something wrong. This is part of my conditioning and part of the sensitive people, that we tend to blame ourselves and put ourselves down. And I've spoken before about my growing realization of the need to practice self-love and self-acceptance, that this is the actual healing. My actual healing is from within me, by changing my relationship with myself slowly and gently over a period of time. It's a natural process, and once I start it, it takes on a life of its own, because it's pulling me out of wounds and conditioning and into wholeness, into resonance with my soul, my essential nature. The integrating part, I like to put it as in 3D spiritual reality, the ego has gotten a really bad rap. I have given my own ego a really bad rap. We have been taught the ego is the problem. If it wasn't for this darn ego and personality and body, I would be enlightened and living and swimming in bliss all the time. And I'm realizing increasingly that's just not the way it is. We're not, I mean, the point of what I would call karma-based religions for thousands of years has been to get the hell out of here as fast as you possibly, get out of this horrible place as fast as you possibly can. And if you're still stuck here, it's because of your selfish, crappy karma. I'm being a little bit extreme, but I think that's the essence of a lot of the religions. And, you know, my question to it is, what if we are exactly where we're intended to be at this time? And we're not here because we're spiritual slouches, and we're not trying to get out of here as quickly as we can. And what's actually happening now, in my opinion, is the soul, we're not trying to transcend to connect with our soul. The soul is actually descending into this realm to integrate and merge with the ego, so that the ego becomes the physical expression of the desires of the soul, not a nemesis, not an opponent, not a struggle, but a vehicle through which the soul expresses. And we're afraid of that because of our fight or flight response, which is built in so much into the human nature. Because the first place we go when change or unknown or uncertainty comes along is fight or flight kicks in. In other words, we get triggered, which is a trauma response based on past memories. The interesting experience that I'm realizing is, if you realize the continuity of life, that it doesn't matter whether you're in a body or not in a body, that everybody in a body is going to die. We're going to die at the appropriate time. We're not going to die 1 minute before or 1 minute after the appropriate time. And that we're here voluntarily. As an opportunity to resolve our own unresolved issues, and also to assist other people in doing the same, and to spread some light and love in the world. And of course, in order to spread light and love in the world, I need to learn how to spread light and love to myself, inside myself, not by having, not by being happy on the outside, but by being happy on the inside. And then I become happy on the outside, gradually, content and peaceful. So my points are that the integrating is a natural process. A certain amount of freaking out of the personality, or call it the wounded inner child. If we can look at our personalities as being the wounds that we've experienced, the unfulfilled places, the shame, trauma, guilt, obligation, duty that was impressed on us. These we have ingested, these we have taken in. And most people, no matter, for the most part, no matter how bad someone's parents are, most of us have a place inside, and the children certainly did, of just simply loving. And we're breaking free from that. And breaking free from conditioning can become an act of love, of self-love. You mean I don't have to do that? You mean I don't have to sacrifice everything? You mean it's okay that there are times that it's okay for me to receive? I don't have to continue to be the one who needs to give and sacrifice and so forth. And this is all part of aligning the ego with the soul. It's a very natural process, and we're actually all in it. It's not like something, it's more, I would say it's more like becoming aware that this process is going on and learning to not see it as bad. And it's going to bring up feelings at times that we don't like. It's going to bring up the wounds. It's going to bring up the pain. And the very reason these are coming up is because they are parts of us that have not been held, that have not felt loved, that have felt afraid. And that they come up as I'm evolving, where I might think that I should be over this by now. It means that I have healed enough that I have space in myself to hold and care for parts of myself that I haven't up until now had space for. That's a really beautiful thing. And that's a reframing, because most of us don't look at it that way. But when the parts are coming up, it doesn't mean I'm backsliding. I had a peak experience last week, and now I'm back to my same old rut. No, no, no. The peak experience is allowing the feelings that I've not been able to integrate yet to come up, because now I can hold them and integrate them. Because the integrated ego can accept without judgment all the parts of itself, including the things that I'm ashamed of, including the things that I wouldn't do again and all that. We're just learning, like little children. We don't hit little children over the head most of the time because they're didn't quite get things right, but we tend to hit ourselves over the head. And when I'm hitting myself over the head, then I tend to hit other people over the head for they're doing these sort of things. So me changing me comes down to more and more I see. Me learning to love and accept where I am and realizing I'm supposed to be exactly the way that I am. I haven't really done anything wrong down the line. It doesn't mean I wouldn't change things I've done, but it means it wasn't wrong to do them. It isn't even wrong if I have to do them 100 times before I get it. It doesn't matter. It's being as conscientious as I can, as much of the time as I can, is to me the attitude to hold. So does anyone have any questions at this point? We'll start looking at the charts. And the way that I want to use the charts is to point out the story of each individual person, the small pieces of bio I received, and how it's, in addition to being their personal theme, it's actually a universal theme, because we can all relate to some version of it. It won't, it's different in each one's life, but the themes are always similar. So let's see. Oh, here they are. I just want to read this. Anya says, I am in Germany with my family. It's been a huge few months. My brother is in the mental clinic. I'm working through my roots in my family karma fourth house. Last week in Amsterdam, on a deep journey, a research project at Berlin Mind Foundation, and using psychedelics in therapy and an integration circle. I was part of the team. Next day, massive rebirth, shamanic rebirth, the most profound ego death I ever had. Very collective and personal purging. I had all women supporting me while I was dying, many deaths and cleaning my karmic state. And that's awesome. I want to look, if you look at Anya's chart, she's got like 17 planets in the second house. I jest. And with that, in other words, this again, I do not see as bad in any way, shape, or form. This can be and also in Virgo, all of this in Virgo, which, and Pluto in Virgo generation, which most of us would realize that Virgo and Pluto in Virgo generation is generally painfully aware of their lacks and faults and shortcomings, and perhaps not as much so of their strength and value in general. And so to have experiences to shake free, to break through, crack up conditioning can be very significant and important, particularly because of a lot of fixed planets in general. She has a south node in the fourth house, and also there with Neptune and Mars and Scorpio. So we're looking at most likely a fair amount of trauma and experiences coming out of childhood on top of that. So cracking all of that open. Now I want to add 2 cents to this, because I myself had lots of psychedelic experiences way back when, because I grew up in that time period where that's what was going on. And what I want to say is that the integrating of ego and soul, and that when we come back from an intense experience, intense in a good way, whether it's psychedelic or natural, a lot has changed, a lot has cracked open. And we have not integrated that because that takes time. And it takes time. It has a timeline of its own. And what I'm saying is not suggesting psychedelics should not be used. What I'm suggesting is that the more change we undergo rapidly, the more involved is the integration process. Now, it's really up to each individual's intuitive sense of what's right and not right for them in terms of the speed at which they're trying to evolve. It's a similar thing for people that are trying really hard to have, say, out-of-body experiences or outer-dimensional experiences and all that. I think these things come, and I feel there's a knowing inside at appropriate times when and how much is appropriate and when isn't. I know from my own experiences, and that they're not, that those are mine, and they're not necessarily universal. But it can feel at times like in order to keep growing, I need to have more experiences, and I know how to do this in a certain setting with a substance or a meditation technique or whatever. And so I need more of that. And that may be true for a period of time. I got a very strong inner message at the time when it was time for me to stop, very strong. So I know these things exist. And it's important, my point is, it's important to integrate, to allow the time to integrate, because the personality and the wounds that come up, it's not always a fun experience dealing with what's bubbling up, but it's a very important part of being a whole, full, balanced human. And we work towards that, and our very journeys are about that. And if, in other words, it can be the fracturing of trauma where we're dissociating from certain parts of ourselves, typically painful parts. And the more adult parts of ourselves are like, yes, I want to grow and I want to grow now, and I'm on this spiritual path and I really want it to happen. And that is great. That is great. But it's kind of like, I'm getting a funny metaphor. When I was a kid, going to a World's Fair and being on some ride, like a big ride with a lot of moving around. And I got off that ride, and I remember feeling like I left my stomach at the top of the ride. And I think that's an interesting metaphor for what I'm talking about, because in order to integrate, all the parts of me need to be involved. It's perfectly fine to have an experience where I'm having a rush of excitement and even awakening. But if I know that I'm leaving a few parts behind to truly integrate, I got to bring those parts in. Now, it's not something I do. It's something that naturally occurs, but I need to be willing. I'll make this point that at this time, with all the change that's going on, many of us are going to have a need for much more downtime and rest and doing very little than is typical, because we are evolving very rapidly. And it's literally exhausting to our bodies. And many people have conditioning about needing to be productive and getting things done and doing this and doing that, and can have parts of them feeling like they're being a slouch by just needing all this sleep or rest, or not feeling motivated to work, or not excited about things that need to be done. I'm not advocating, that you stop going to your job unless you really want to, like, change your job. But what I'm saying is, we may very well need additional downtime at this time and during heavy integration periods, especially after having gone through a lot of change. It doesn't just require spiritual work. If you're gone off on a 3-week trip to another part of the world, you've gone through a lot of changes from that. When you come back, you need time to integrate that. If you just go back to the old routine, a lot of the change that has just occurred, which is part of one's growth, it's not that it goes away, but it's going to be backburner. It needs to integrate. Another point I want to make is that many people find with change like this that the cast of characters of people that they want close in their life suddenly requires change. In other words, some people, even people that we've been close to for a really long time, may at times, it's like, I don't feel like being around that person anymore, at least at this time. Sometimes it's family members, sometimes it's people that are close, sometimes it's with coworkers. This is a natural part of the integrating cycle, because we are changing deeply from the inside out, and we're going to be attracting differently. We will find some people remain in the life. Typically, the relationship changes. It can go to new depth, or it can just change in some ways. Others will just not feel drawn and they kind of fade out, at least temporarily. And sometimes new people are coming in. I'm finding not so many new people coming in at this time in my life, because I'm sensing I have to go through a lot of what I'm going through relatively by myself. And the sense that people that are resonant with where I actually am now, where I am going to, will be appearing at the right time, at the due time. The way to look at it is, if I feel lonely or there's not people around, that's what I need. It's not bad that I feel lonely. It's a sign of the changes that are going on. I can honor the loneliness, and I can find the fulfillment of the needs that I feel lonely about inside of myself, rather than, or learn how to, rather than trying to find people externally to try to get away from the uncomfortable feelings, whatever they are: loneliness, frustrated, confused, are some of them. These are part of the changes going on. So I hadn't really thought out too much how I was going to go with this in working with the charts, and I'm feeling on you. I'm sorry if this feels a little impersonal, but I wanted to use your chart here, the way it came out, as an example of how other people can take these principles and apply them to their own life and their own situation. So the next chart is Ellen. And Let me get Ellen's chart up here for myself. Wrong one second. Okay. So Ellen wrote, since my second nodal return 2 years ago, my whole life has changed. I'm going through a divorce, move, major decisions about life path, whether or not to continue as a licensed therapist. She's had 3 out of 5 Pluto square Pluto conjunctions. Neptune and Chiron transiting the 10 or 11 planets, points, asteroids they have in Pisces, and some other transits. During this time, my spirituality, spiritual gifts have come back online after many years of suppression, following a traumatic experience at age 22 in 2001. And, you know, my first comments are when, so Ellen literally has 17 things in Pisces. I exaggerate a little bit, of course. When I look at a chart with that much Pisces, I see that there's a very, very, very sensitive being here. And what was I going to say? I think the part about having a traumatic awakening experience early on and it going underground for many years is kind of a good example. It's a big example, like a blown up example, because it's intense and it's more than most people would experience. But you could literally say that it's taken many years since that experience, and various expressions, life expressions, such as becoming a therapist and so forth, in attempting to integrate what occurred. And then it took a long time. But the integration has reached a point where it is now becoming whole, which is bringing about even more changes in Ellen's life. And, you know, of course, so she's wondering exactly, well, what do I do now? How do I make this work? And my very first words to that are that it will simply continue to unfold. I sense like you know this anyway. In other words, if you don't know exactly what to do with it yet, it's because it's not time for you to know what to do with it yet. And that it's going to unfold step by step, just as it has all along. Now, this is not the news or advice that our personalities tend to like to hear, because I want to know, and I need to know what exactly I'm supposed to be doing right now. This is speaking for myself. You know, and learning, well, it doesn't work that way. And what, you know, so it's like life saying to me, well, if you knew right now what it was you were going to be doing when it's not time for it to be happening yet, of what value is that to you? You're just going to start making preconceptions and get out of the present moment and be focused on the future. Why? Because I find the present uncomfortable. It brings up feelings I'm not comfortable with, I don't like. But the reason I don't know is because it's not time for me to know. And it gives me the opportunity to be able to be with places in me that I am not comfortable with, and also to practice trusting that life knows what it's doing. And that I'm going to be okay. including allowing myself to feel all the places where I don't feel okay, when I don't, when I'm afraid, when I'm uncertain, when I get excited about this or thinking about that in terms of ideas. Um, and that's a beautiful thing. I haven't experienced it before as a beautiful thing. It is. What it means is if I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing, I can be relaxing. It doesn't mean I'm missing the boat. It means I have more time to work on integrating. Or not work. Let me rephrase that. That was the old me. To be in the process, in the state of flowing with the changes that are going on, knowing that their very intention is further integration. I would say, in between all that Pisces in your 10th house and also having an Aries moon, that you're, in terms of even my 10 cents, even in terms of your traditional therapy, it may not be so much an either or sort of decision. It's kind of like evolving what you're already doing to further integrate what you know within yourself, which goes beyond the perimeters of what's currently called therapy. And it's like you don't have to toss it off. You can use it as a launching pad to expand beyond that. Whether you still are going around presenting yourself as a therapist or as more than that, that's not known yet, and that isn't really what's most important. But you clearly are bringing in energies that will help with all this Pisces and Aries moon 10th house, with a passion and a desire to help people wake up and become more deeply aware of who they really are. And that will happen. That you're on that path, and everything that's happened since you had the waking up experience is about helping you how to ground so that you can function in the expanded consciousness awareness that you have with it, knowing that you have within you in a body and living a life like people do, so that you can relate to their lives. Because people need to be able to trust somebody that's going to guide them and not seem like they're from another planet. Even though inside, you may feel like you're from another planet, and you might even be from another planet. But it's like learning how to function in a body so that Earth people that haven't yet had the intensity of experience that you have won't feel that you're so weird that they can't relate to it. And I think that's really important in terms of all of us helping to awaken the Earth. I feel it like it flows through me. People appear somehow in my life that can benefit from some things that I share. I don't know how that works, but it just works. And it will continue to work for you. And,
thank you for saying that.
You're very welcome. I want to give at least 2 minutes to Eileen.
Steve, you can have more than 2 minutes. You can have about eight minutes if you like.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you. Awesome. So Eileen says, Eileen, how old are you, Eileen?
27.
27? Good. So Eileen is you know, for me, the younger generation coming up. No, she hasn't had her first Saturn return. I moved to a new city and a new house and started working a new job a couple of months ago. This was a big transition. After a few years traveling and moving from place to place, job to job, I've decided to stay in one place for at least a little bit of time. After focusing on my soul, I began to realize I was neglecting my physical body and personality. Learning to find a balance with ego soul is actually a big part of my journey. And, you know, I say that 27 years old, you're doing, and waking up, you're doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing. To me, the 20s are about having all kinds of seemingly random experiences that, lo and behold, later in life actually prove to have not been random at all, but are laying a foundation for what that life intention and purpose is to be. So here we have second house Pluto, which is for second house Pluto to be traveling all over the place. That's a good sign. That's a good sign. And even the integrating part, I think that it's good early in life to put a lot of emphasis on waking up, on spiritual practice, and so forth. The beauty of living a human life, which astrology reveals, is there's a natural timing or blueprint for how all the parts of this unfold. We forget this, and we, even with knowledge of astrology, we can forget that at times because it's not that common. That there is an overall blueprint of our life, that our life is not random, and we're not really making mistakes. We're having experiences. Not all of them are fun, and many of them, of course, don't turn out the way we thought they might or wanted them to. But even so, those experiences are an important part of that person's path, and that's why we're having them. So to be going around in the 20s, essentially collecting a lot of experiences, that's awesome. The Saturn return, which I didn't, I don't know, yours is like 2-3 years. I have found in general, most people take a few years after their Saturn return, so 32, 33, to actually start, I guess I could use the word integrating it. It's I consider it the transition from childhood into adulthood. Late 20s, you know, one feels pretty adult, and in a lot of ways we are. But there's a shifting that occurs, and it's a natural shifting, and it's not like anything wrong was done, but it's more like moving into, I could look at the first years before the first Saturn return as the extended education. We think of education as going to school, and that's part of it, but the whole first part of the life is a life education. And the second part on the other side of that Saturn return is start becoming aware of, okay, what more specifically, what is my life going to be about? How am I going to ground? What do I feel drawn to do? In terms of direction. Your chart actually, with a lot, fourth house planets and Saturn in the fourth house, you know, working Taurus moon in the second house Pluto, working with in Cancer South mode, working in some capacity with families or children or elderly in the broadest sense. In the broadest sense. If you were to feel drawn that way, might be realms where you might feel at home and learn what it is that's there for you to learn. You have a lot of retrogrades in that fourth house, and that says to me that whatever you're learning, you're going to learn to do it in your own way. In your own way, and to not get pulled into the way you're supposed to do it, put it that way. The Libra rising, that can be a tendency, is to remember your own way and your own path. And there's reasons for you having done the things you're doing, and there will be for the things you're going to do. So to wind this all down, for all three of our volunteers, I wanted to point out how this gets integrated, because I'm finding that's really, really, really important. The integrating of the experiences that we have, because that's where we become whole with them and truly become helpful, most helpful to others that we are going to encounter on our paths. I am coming back, I think 3 more times before the end of the year, and I'm just going to keep talking on these themes as my own life unfolds, because that's what I'm all about at this point. So thank you again for attending, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you. Thank you to the volunteers. We'll see you next time. Would you all please thank Steve Wolfson?
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Steve.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve.
So much resonated.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Very welcome. Thank you.